Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greideck. I'm Dr. Martha Greideck. This podcast examines a wide variety of topics through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. While this podcast may be seen as most well-suited for white-collar employees and their employers, the ideas and topics presented here may be applied across a wide variety of jobs and industries. Additionally, many of the concepts and ideas presented here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I suggest that you examine the information presented here, apply what works for you, and simply discard the rest. Many of you have probably heard the term SMART goals. SMART is an acronym. It stands for S being specific, M being measurable, A stands for achievable, R stands for realistic, and T stands for timely. There is a reason why SMART goals are quite popular and have been around for a while. It's because the acronym, the concept of SMART goals works. So let's go through each letter of the acronym SMART and go over why that particular component of this concept is important. First is S for specific. Why is it important that our goals be specific? Well, if we don't have well-defined goals, how would we know what to aim for? In other words, think of it this way. If you don't have a destination, how do you know where to go? How do you know where to aim, in which direction to travel? And then, how do you know if you got there, if you've achieved your goal, if you've reached your destination? So it's very important that our SMART goals, any goal really, is specific, meaning we have to define it. And the better the definition, the more specific, the more well-defined a goal is, the better it will be, the easier it will be for us to aim ourselves in the right direction and then know whether or not we've achieved it. Another important component of SMART goals is letter M, which means measurable. How do you know you're making progress if you can't measure it? So we have to make sure that when we define our goals, they are defined in such a way that we can measure our progress. If we can't measure whether or not we are making progress in our goals, it's very difficult to identify that we're making progress at all. And knowing that you're making progress can be very helpful in motivating us in continuing on our way towards the end result or towards our goal. If we can't measure whether or not we're making progress, we can't be inspired by the idea of achieving our goal. And also we can't make the necessary corrections on the way. If you're not making the kind of progress that you need to be making in order to achieve your goal, then only by measuring that goal can you make the appropriate changes. If the goal is not measurable, it will be that much more difficult to know whether or not you're making progress and whether or not you need to make changes in order to reach your final destination, that being your goal. Your goal has to be achievable and realistic. I'll talk about those two at the same time. If our goals are not achievable, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't aim for the sky. Aim high. Aim in such a way that you have to push yourself and you have to stretch in order to achieve that goal. But don't make that goal out of reach. Don't make it so something that you can't achieve. So it's very important that our goals are achievable and realistic. So while we want to stretch ourselves, we want to push ourselves, we want to have goals that make us work hard to achieve them, they have to be realistic. So if you're an adult who has finished growing in terms of your height and you set a goal to grow another foot or foot and a half, you have to consider whether or not that's realistic. Of course, I'm not one to tell someone that they can't achieve a goal, but at the same time, I would not want you to set yourself up for failure by setting goals that are not realistic. So make sure that your goals are achievable and realistic. The final component to SMART goals is a time frame. It's important that we give ourselves some kind of a schedule, some kind of a time restriction in which we want to achieve that goal. The reason for that is that it helps us to get organized and it can serve as a motivator. If we set a goal and we don't give ourselves a time schedule, some kind of a date by which we want to achieve that goal, we really have no reason to get going in our steps towards achieving that goal. So it's very, very important that we set some kind of a time schedule, some kind of a date by which we want to achieve our goals. As I've mentioned at the beginning of the episode, many of you have already heard of SMART goals. For those who have not, you've just had an opportunity to learn something new. So I encourage you to apply this SMART goal concept as you set goals in the future. SMART goals are a very good idea. This is a very good concept that helps us to define goals properly, define them well, and then it helps us to achieve those goals. But there's another component to goal setting. There's another level, a secret, if you will, to achieving our goals. And that part comes with the idea of breaking down our bigger goals into smaller goals. Sometimes the goals that we set can be quite large, and that's okay. We should have big goals in our life, whether it's work related or personal life related. Sometimes it can be overwhelming when we look at these big goals and we try to figure out how we're going to achieve those goals. It's a little bit like climbing Mount Everest, and you have no idea how you're going to get to the top. So a very important component of goal achievement, of successful goal achievement, is breaking down the goals into smaller components, into smaller goals. And while this sounds like a very simple and straightforward practice, it's extremely efficient and helpful in achieving those bigger goals. Big goals can seem overwhelming, and sometimes they can produce stress in our lives because we're trying to figure out how to achieve those big goals. When you break down a big goal into smaller goals and then apply the SMART goal concept into each one of those smaller goals, achieving that big goal can seem like a breeze. So rather than feeling overwhelmed by your big goals, embrace your big goals, set those big goals, but make sure that you're breaking them down into smaller goals and then applying the SMART goal concept to each one of those smaller goals. You will see how much easier it will be to achieve that large goal if you undertake this practice. As today's episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. The concept of SMART goals can be extremely helpful in, 1, defining our goals properly, and 2, having the motivation and the drive to actually achieve them. It's important to set our goals using the SMART goal concept. Remember, don't limit yourself to small goals. Make your goals as big as you want them to be, as long as they're achievable and realistic. The secret to achieving our big goals is to break them down into smaller goals and, of course, applying the SMART goal concept to each one of those smaller goals. As the week unfolds, I invite you to review your existing goals and consider some of your future goals. Look at them through the lens of the SMART goal concept. How can you improve your chances of successfully achieving your goals by applying the SMART goals concept? And remember to break down those big goals into smaller goals so that you improve your chances of achieving your overall big goals. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I hope that you will join me again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.